Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Erik Torenberg, hello.
Hello, Noah. How is your trip going?
Trip is going all right. It's going all right. Met lots of cool Polish folks. Going to my friend's wedding, seeing some people I knew, back in high school.
Wow. Well, you've been I think we've been fairly bullish on Poland in this podcast. Has your bullishness been confirmed?
Yes. I mean, not only does the place looks great. I'm in Warsaw, which people say is not the prettiest city at all, but it's just so, it's obviously a modern place. It looks gorgeous and has all the conveniences of everything everywhere. People are just really, they're excited about economic growth. You see that in like some parts of the developing world. You saw that in China until recently. You see that in just a very few countries, and it's pretty cool to encounter in the real world. Just to meet people who are just thinking all day, like, how do we keep this amazing growth going?
Yeah, amazing.
You ever been here?
No, I've never been to Poland.
Oh man, yeah, people should go. Like, it's great. People are friendly and fun, and yeah.
Good to know. Before we get into the segments of the show, speaking of growing, I just want to say, the Dario episode was our most popular episode yet. So our show continues to grow. And that just happened by us summoning him into existence. And so I want to take 30 seconds and just summon anyone else onto our show who we'd want to get. Any other dream guests that would be amazing to come on. Obviously, because we did Anthropic, it'd be great to get Sam Altman. Ilya and Daniel Gross just launched a company today. So any other luminaries in AI, it'd be great to.
If we want to do more AI stuff,
anything else?
I mean, we've talked a lot about AI. We could do more. Like Sam is great. I like Sam. He's around.
Who would you want on?
I don't know. Maybe some. I mean, if we're getting tech people that we know, like in San Francisco, who could we get? We need Sergey Brin. Do we know him? Yeah, let's get Sergey. That would be awesome. I think he's an awesome dude. Yeah.
What would you want to talk to him about?
Oh, just like the future of technology and how the tech industry's changed since he invented Google, and where does he think stuff is going? Like, he doesn't do a lot of like philanthropic work like Bill Gates, but he's just a super smart guy.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the mailbag. We haven't done one in a while, and we've got a good list of questions here. So this one is a little bit on the nose or a little bit harsh, but it's from Ray in New York, and Ray says, "Hey Noah, you wrote a post about why we should not ignore economists, but why should we listen to economists given that they have a very difficult time predicting anything?"
Well, who will guard the guardians? Maybe. Oh, did you mean like, why should we listen to economists tell you shouldn't ignore economists? Economists predict all kinds of things. Like, every time you use Google, the reason why Google's search is, I mean, Google search is now getting kind of bad, but maybe we can ask Sergey about that. But Google can, serve up good search results because it has a lot of information from ads about what people want, and it can serve up a lot of ads because people are searching on it. And so, so there's this network effect for Google and its ads. But why are Google ads such a giant moneymaker? It's because of economics. It's because auction theory will predict how much money each person will bid and how much money you can sell an ad for. So it allows you to determine the right price for ads, and it's incredibly effective. Economists, many of the techniques now used by machine learning people to predict any from transit ridership, I don't know. These were pioneered by econometricians, which is a fancy word for like economists who do stats, right? So you had Dan McFadden in the 1970s predicting how many people would ride the new BART extension much better than any of the people who planned the whole thing. And, he got a Nobel Prize for inventing mixed logit models, which basically, not mixed logit. I mean, he didn't invent that, but it was for inventing like discrete choice models, but there was a mixed logit in there. And in the end, it looked like an incredibly simple neural net. This is 1976, I think. So, economists can predict all kinds of things. Gravity models of trade are very effective at predicting what countries trade with what countries. Like, people who think economists can't predict anything, they heard someone say that. Like, they don't actually know what that means. Sorry, Ray, but like, show me where economists can't predict anything. Now, I will tell you, so economists also were very good at predicting the effects of minimum wage hikes, right? So economists basically predicted that the fight for 15 would not result in significant job losses, and it didn't, right? There's a number of reasons for that, but basically they did predict that would be the case. And taxes, they're pretty good at predicting the impact of tax changes. Boring stuff, you don't sit around and think, ooh, tax changes. Wow, economists are brilliant, because boring, right? You want to know, will there be a recession? Will there be inflation? You want to know about macroeconomic forecasting. And that is one branch of economics where economists totally suck, right? And can't predict anything.
Yeah, and inflation, et cetera. Why not?
Yeah, no, why not? Because, well, there's a couple reasons, but the main reason is because there's just no data. Like, a business cycle happens every 5 to 10 years. And how many business cycles have we had since World War II? Like a handful. Each one of those is like one data point to test a theory. Could you test a data point with a theory with 12 data points and like validate some incredibly complex theory about how macro stuff works? No, you can't. Like, we just don't have enough data to validate any of these theories. And the kind of theories you have to make to really explain the economy are going to be complex things. It's a complex system. That means you need a complex theory. And it's really hard to do that kind of theory. You need a lot of data. And so we don't even know what kind of data we need to do this, and whether we can get it from like watching how people change how much they pay for things at scanners, at grocery stores. People are trying all kinds of stuff like this, but we're just, macroeconomics really is in its infancy, I would say. And so unfortunately, that's kind of the big thing, like, that everyone wants from macroeconomists. Like back in the days when physicists were just getting started, the reason they got their big break is because the big thing everyone wanted was planetary orbits, right? Because everyone was into astrology or some close variant of astrology. So because of that, they wanted physics to be able to predict eclipses and, whether Mercury would be in retrograde. I don't even know, right? Like, they wanted that stuff. They wanted planetary orbits. And physicists could predict that. But like, physicists are like, hey guys, we could, you could make like a cannon or like a pendulum clock or something cool. And these guys are like, no, astrology. So the thing is that actually planetary orbits are a chaotic system, but they are stable enough where you can predict them pretty well, actually. Obviously we also have the 3-body problem, right? We know that eventually Jupiter will suddenly just decide to crash into us and we'll all die, but not soon.
In the meantime, it goes back to the quote of, if you're so smart, why aren't you so rich? And it is interesting that sort of the people who are academic economists and the people who are, hedge fund managers are different people, right? There's not a huge overlap between that segment.
Well, right, but that's because, do you want to train for 2 careers? Like, academics went into academia because they didn't care as much about money as they cared about having people, think that they were smart. Like,
but they're both trying to predict the economy, right? They're both trying to understand what's happening and predict what's going to happen, right?
Right, that's right. But like, physicists are smart as heck, and you don't see a lot of them getting rich because they're spending all their time contemplating the mysteries of physics. And economics is the same way.
But there's no money in contemplating the physics of the mysteries of physics. There's a lot of money in understanding the economy. If you really understand it.
Is there? There's not necessarily a lot of money in understanding the economy. Like, most of the things that you would understand are like policy things. But I will say that Hal Varian, who did much of the auction theory behind Google Auctions, is rich as hell. That guy, I don't even know Hal Varian. Let me look up Hal Varian's net worth. That guy, by the way, Hal Varian net worth, it's an auto prompt here. Yeah, he's a billionaire, I'm sure. But like, and that's from economics. He made that money with economics.
Satoshi maybe is an economist, who knows? But okay. So I want to go to the next question. This is from Eol Salmon, Eole maybe Eole Salmon. So I almost wonder if it's a fake name. But okay, so Eole asks, why are corporate income taxes not eliminated in favor of higher capital gains or personal income taxes? I feel like they're just a convoluted way to distribute subsidies through different depreciation allowances.
Yeah, well, I think you just answered your own question.
Well, he has to follow up real quick. He says, how should governments manage the popularity of inefficient taxes, i.e. wealth taxes, and the unpopularity of efficient taxes, i.e. land value-added tax, in deciding tax policy?
Well, hell, I don't know. That's a political question. I don't really know the answer to that. As for corporate tax, basically for years and years, people have been shouting, lower the corporate tax and replace it with other taxes. And guess what we did? We did. That's what Trump's tax cut is. Like, that's Trump's tax reform. That was actually, I supported that, that move. because it did increase deficits, but it didn't increase it by much because of the salt cap thing. And had Democrats not blocked the full salt cap repeal, it would have been completely revenue neutral, right? Democrats blocked a tax increase. That's something people don't know. Trump tried to increase taxes on high earners in blue states, i.e. rich Democrats. They blocked the tax increase. That's bad. I didn't want that. I was like, no, please raise my taxes. I am a high earner in blue states. Please raise my taxes, And then they were like, no, because that would make it too hard for states to do blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so they partially negotiated that down so that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 ended up, increasing the deficit by a little bit, but not by a huge amount. But the corporate tax cut, that was fine. And now Owen Zadar and some other economists have done some pretty good research on this that shows that it did boost investment. You did get an investment boost from this. And yay, we won. The investment boost is relatively modest. When you're taking econ classes, they teach you models about the distortions of these various taxes. What they don't teach you is the sizes of these, right? They teach you you can draw a little supply and demand and look at a hypothetical amount and then put in some numbers if you want. But those curves aren't real and those numbers aren't real. And when you look at the actual distortions, they don't look that big from taxes. So when we cut the corporate tax, business investment did increase a little bit, but only a little bit. So it was good. It was a good move overall, but it wasn't a game changer. It wasn't a big move. And so that's basically the story. Personal income tax is generally better than corporate income tax, but the corporate income tax is low enough where it's not going to make a huge difference. No corporation in America is out there not investing because of the 15% tax they'll have to pay.
While we're on the topic, thanks to Yoli, can you briefly comment on the unrealized gains? Is it as dumb as people think it is? Jason Furman thinks there's some logic to it. Where do you stand?
I'm about to write about this more extensively, actually, and so I'll write a longer post about this. But the answer is that it's a complicated system to set it up and do it, and it's fraught with all kinds of problems. They've tried to fix a lot of the problems, but there's still other problems they haven't fixed, as Tyler Cowen has pointed out. And the thing is, there's easier things to do, right? You could just repeal the step-up basis. Don't allow people to wipe all capital gains when they die, right? And so you could just repeal that. And so that would take care of pretty much all of it. That would raise a ton of revenue, and it would be fair too, and it'd be simple to administrate. It would just be so simple. There's such simple things we can do. Why don't we just do that instead of, trying to introduce a whole new tax system just because, this is one of those things where someone has an idea and other people are like, no, this is terrible. And then all the nerds are like, well, actually, I thought of a way it could work. I'm like, okay, fine. You did. But let's think of the political economy here of who cares? Why are you doing it in the first place? Like rich people borrowing to consume is not even a big thing. Yeah, they do some of that, but they pay interest on it. And and rich people consume very little of their money anyway. It's, and the thing is, do you want to by taxing unrealized gains, you'd actually make rich people consume more of their wealth, right? You'd reduce the paper wealth that accrues over time, and therefore you'd reduce wealth inequality, and Gabriel Zuckman and Thomas Piketty would be happy, but because number go down. But in reality, what you get is rich people consuming more of their wealth and living high on the hog, and you'll get consumption inequality, right? You'll get rich people buying more yachts, more mansions. Guess what? Rich people are coming for your land in that case, right? Because first of all, because land's an illiquid asset, and if you can minimize the property taxation, then it'll actually be a way to shelter tax from the wealth tax, the unrealized gains tax. And so rich people, what are they going to consume? What are they going to buy? Rich people don't buy that much compared to what they earn. They stick it in some trust and give it to philanthropy and whatever. They don't buy that much compared to what they earn. And if you start taxing away, if you start saying, well, if you don't spend it, we'll tax it. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to spend it. And so what are you going to spend it on? Well, what is there at some point, the only thing to buy is land. And so they're going to buy land. They're going to buy your land. They're going to buy land on which the land of your city, and the land on which your potential future housing might be, and the land that you would use to go to the beach and walk around in the forest and have a park. They will buy all the land, and then rich people own more land. And I don't know, it's the gains from this are just pretty dubious. And then there's so many other things we could do to raise this revenue from capital gains in a reasonable, simple way. That like, it's just a thing that people decided we want to do, and then just sort of, memed themselves into dying on this hill. Anyway, I'll write more about that in the days to come.
Great. Let's go to a question by listener Blair Pritchard. Okay, Blair's got a back-to-back question. One is China's industrial strategy consistent with new trade theory in that it seems to be trying to capture increasing returns to scale? And he asks separately, if China is now directing 5% of GDP to industrial subsidies, as has recently been reported, what is the correct game theoretic response for other newly industrializing nations such as Thailand, Vietnam, and India?
Okay, good questions. New trade theory does have economies of scale, but it's more about the economies of scale it's more about variety. So the economies of scale is like you make more different things, right? And you could say China's trying to harness that too, but it's not quite the exact same sort of scale type of thing. I think that's but you can say there are economies of scale out there, and China's trying to harness that, and that's perfectly reasonable and possible. They're trying to harness economies of scale. I don't think that's the number one thing that they're thinking about. I think they're thinking more about like push technological progress forward, increase productivity, blah, blah, blah. I think, and maybe trade stuff. I don't think they're thinking first and foremost about increasing returns to scale, but I do think that if you press them, they'd be like, yeah, increasing returns to scale. Sure. It's great. So I think that it's consistent with that. And then the other question is, China's subsidizing a bunch of exports. What do the little guys do in response to that? Well, it would be nice if we could have some sort of agreement, like a partnership across the Pacific, like a trans-Pacific partnership or something like that, we could call it, that would allow us to partner with all those little guys so that we all create one big, unified market that, will take away their disadvantage vis-a-vis China. But we canceled that because Bernie was against it and Trump was against it, and Trump is the guy who ended up killing it. And even they bullied good old Hillary into saying that she was against it too. And so the Trans-Pacific Partnership was a good idea. We canceled it. So now basically those countries have to just hope that America puts up high tariffs on China, because first of all, that will make their own products more competitive. But second of all, it will make Chinese companies have to move their factories to those countries to get around the tariff.
I want to segue while we're talking about China to bring up a piece you wrote or republished on New Axis. What is you sort of describe China and Russia as having a more of a relationship than people appreciate, or more of a sort of shared interests. What gives you confidence there, or how do you make sense of that?
I mean, so an axis is like a loose partnership. China and Russia are not formal allies. North Korea, is out there. Iran is not formal allies with either of these guys, but they're all sort of supporting each other, right? Those four countries. They tried to get Pakistan in there, but Pakistan was like, no, thank you. We're too poor. Go play by yourself. And so it's interesting that it's these middle income countries. Well, North Korea is poor, but North Korea is insane. But like Iran, Russia, China, they're middle income countries, right? They're upper middle income countries, maybe. They're not rich countries, but they're not poor countries either. They're sort of in that range where like they have enough economic heft to do something, but then maybe not enough wealth where they're just like, yeah, life is good, Anyway, those guys are loosely cooperating because they all really don't like America. And they think America is the incumbent power, and we've got to overthrow America so that we can rule the world ourselves, so that Iran can rule the Middle East, so that China can rule Asia and possibly the world, so that Russia can rule Europe and Central Asia. Like there's regions of, so North Korea, I don't know what those guys are. But then basically these are empires, right? They want to rule their corner of the world. Interestingly, they're all successor states to the Mongol Empire, even though Mongolia hates them. But they are successor states of the Mongol Empire. They are the Golden Horde, the Empire of the Great Khan, and the Ilkhanate. Those are the Iran is the Ilkhanate. And then the Central Asian stand countries were the fourth successor part, but it broke up. So. But basically, it's the three post-Mongol empires. They want to take over stuff, and America is like this distant thing that then intervenes to stop them. When China was going to take over Korea, we stopped them. When the Soviet Union was going to take over all of Europe, we stopped them. Iran, I don't know if they were going to ever successfully take over things, but we would stop them anyway. They're kind of incompetent. But anyway, so like these guys want to take over their regions. And in China's case, maybe a little more than their region. but the United States is like this offshore balancer that stands in their way. So they're cooperating, even though as imperial powers, they are giving each other the side eye. Like China extracts as much wealth from Russia as it can get, even as it tries to help it in the Ukraine war and diplomatically. And like Russia and China have often, almost gone to war, and sometimes they did go to war. And they're rival empires with a very long border and some disputed territories that Russia unfairly seized from China during the century of humiliation of China. Russia seized all the territories that are now like, Vladivostok and those places. That used to be China, man. We used to rule that. And then Russia's like, nope, ours, because we have the guns and you don't. And so that was, they did that. And they forced all kinds of unequal treaties on them. And they basically treated China badly. Because everyone kind of did at that point, except the United States was okay. We didn't really treat China badly, but we don't get any credit from China for this. Completely ungrateful. Anyway, but so China and Russia are not like buddies. They're not like, we love you, but they are cooperating against America, along with some of these smaller countries. How's that for the new Axis summary?
That's great. And so before getting to the next question, is your view that in a likely, World War III in the next decade or two, these would be the three countries that would be on the other side?
Yes, these would be on the other side. So what coalition of countries in the world can match China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea all together? Like that's a juggernaut of an alliance, right? That alliance of empires. And maybe everybody else, us, plus Europe, plus India, plus Japan, plus South Korea, plus whoever else we can get, on our side. I don't know, Saudi Arabia, maybe Israel. I don't know. Who else even is there? I mean, I guess Vietnam, it's some small countries. Maybe we could get those on our side. That's a hard fight to fight against all those at once. We've never had anything like that we had to do. You can't fight the whole world,
Yeah, how would that war even happen today? Like, is that just, does everyone get blown up? Like, how do hot wars even happen in a world where everyone's got nukes?
I don't know. Ukraine happened.
Right. But yeah.
I mean, escalation happens in stages, right? So like, China attacks Taiwan. We fight their fleet. They try to send more after us. We bomb some of their bases. They say, oh, stop doing this or we're going to nuke you. We'll be like, we'll nuke you. No, we'll nuke you. No, we'll nuke you. And then, then maybe we nuke each other or maybe we don't. Or maybe we just keep saying I'm going to nuke you and then not doing it and fighting with conventional forces because only a few hundreds of thousands of people die instead, or maybe a couple million instead of like 100 million, 200 million, a billion, so I don't think we could actually kill a billion people. Maybe we could. I'm not sure. Our nuke stockpiles have dwindled so much. I don't know if we could kill a billion people, but it's worth finding out. Drop those nukes, solve climate change, blow up the world. Anyway.
But it's your view that we would lose to China head to head, which is different than, or that we could lose to China head to head right now, contrary to sort of.
I don't know if we exactly would. I don't know, but I think we easily could.
But it's unclear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's China has the production capacity, so everyone thinks a war is going to be over in a week, right? But the truth is that wars go on longer than that. Once in a while, you'll see a war over really quick, but it's the 6-day war was, I think, only 6 days. True to its name. But usually wars are much longer, and then you just end up having to throw your whole industrial production system into the whole war, and whoever can outproduce the other will eventually win, and that's China. They can outproduce everybody.
We'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a B2B SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, SCIM provisioning, role-based access control, and audit trails. That's where WorkOS comes in, with easy-to-use and flexible APIs that help you ship enterprise features on day one without slowing down your core product development. Today, some of the hottest startups in the world are already powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know, like Perplexity, Vercel, Jasper, and Webflow. WorkOS also provides a generous free tier of up to 1 million monthly active users for user management, making it the perfect authentication and authorization solution for growing companies. It comes standard with rich features like bot protection, MFA, roles and permissions, and more. If you are currently looking to build SSO for your first enterprise customer, you should consider using WorkOS. Integrate in minutes and start shipping enterprise plans today.
Well, related to that, I want to go to a question by Anant Tamang, or Tamang. Anant asks, what industrial policy would you think is best for small landlocked South Asian nations such as Nepal and Bhutan, whose neighbors are India and China? Do you think neighboring these giants is a positive or negative?
Well, being landlocked is bad, but neighboring the giants is good if you're politically willing to just like cooperate with the giants. So the answer, what should Nepal and Bhutan do? It's trade with India and get India to outsource stuff to you because you're right there. That's it. Just do that. And get tourists from India. Maybe they'll go climb some mountains.
I want to segue to a question by Evan Delord. In a recent weekly roundup, you talked about how drug prices being bargained down in America is a good thing. Well, this appears sound. I've heard arguments that Americans essentially subsidize the expensive drug trials for the rest of the world. You mentioned in the footnotes that other countries have lower prices and still perform drug trials. But wouldn't many of these companies also sell drugs in the US to recoup their trial costs? Are there clear examples that the high drug prices aren't needed to bring more useful drugs to market?
Yeah, the answer to this is that I don't really know. I've heard this argument. This is called cost shifting. I've heard this argument that like America is bankrolling everybody else's drug innovation for the whole rest of the world. Now here, suppose it's true though. I don't know. I've got to look into it more. I don't have a firm opinion on that. However, I will say, why should we do that? Can anyone give me an argument of why we should pay? I mean, like, it's good. Yes, it's a public good. I understand. We're like paying for other people to be healthy. We're subsidizing other people's miracle cures and whatever. But should we? Like, why should they be free riding on us? Is that good? Should we keep on like charging our people, American citizens, double for double healthcare? Double for the same quality healthcare that you get in like Korea or Japan or wherever. Should we keep on charging these insane high prices just so we can subsidize stuff to help Europe and Japan and India and, all these places, China? Like, should we do that? Is that smart? Like, is it smart to overcharge Americans just to subsidize foreigners? Like, from a nationalistic standpoint, I would say that this is not smart. From an altruistic standpoint, maybe it is. I don't know. And that remains to be seen. But from a nationalistic standpoint, just think about like, why would we do this?
Yeah, Noah, did you write the book, The Art of the Deal? You're sounding very pragmatic here. I'm just teasing.
I'm renegotiating the deal. Pray I do not alter it further.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay. Listener Nadim Ahmed asks, what do you think of adopting accounting-driven net worth-based fiscal rules targets? Is it better than the current normal debt to GDP metric? If it's better, why haven't countries other than New Zealand adopted it?
Well, I don't know what that means. Wait, can you read again what he asked? Accounting-based fiscal what? Sorry, Nadim, I do not know what that is.
Accounting-driven net worth-based fiscal rules targets.
Net worth-based fiscal rule. Why would fiscal rules be based on net worth? I don't get that.
Fiscal rules / targets.
Oh, well, so it could be like a macroprudential thing where like if people lose a bunch of money, you do a bunch of stimulus because then people will feel poorer. But I think that sort of consumption stimulus effect has been proven to be pretty small compared to other determinants of business cycles. Honestly, what drives business cycles is liquidity, not asset values. So if you look at stock busts don't actually cause recessions. It's banking busts. It's debt busts, right? Banking crises cause recessions. So big recessions, like maybe a stock bust could cause like a little squiggle, like a little downturn, like in 2001. Remember that recession? No, because nobody does, because it was like nothing. It was a nothing burger after the dot-com crash. So, however, I am very low confidence that I actually addressed the right question right there. I don't know what that was actually asking. So let me look up. It said New Zealand, right? New Zealand fiscal rule, government's fiscal strategy, introduction to New Zealand's fiscal policy framework. This 13-page pamphlet. Pause the show, and make people listen to like some little music. They have fiscal rules, but I don't know what the rules do. Fiscal rules are fine. It's good. If we created a fiscal Fed and had Congress turn it over a bunch of money, then the fiscal Fed, it wouldn't matter whether it was rules or discretion. So I think the important policy is actually the fiscal Fed, is the independence of a fiscal authority from the day-to-day stuff of politics, like the Fed. And what you could do is you'd have a big pot of money or or not even pot of money. You'd have an authorization to borrow up to a certain amount on behalf of the U.S. government, and you'd have like a credit card limit, basically, for this thing. And you'd say, all right, and basically you'd give it the same mission as the Fed, and then the Fed and the fiscal authority would coordinate with each other. They would just work together because they wouldn't want to push in opposite directions. That's, except in rare cases. So what they do is they'd say like, okay, all right, kids, there's a recession, people aren't spending, we're going to build some roads now. It's road building time. And then they wouldn't have to like fight a whole big stimulus bill through Congress. This would be a good idea to have this fiscal Fed. The problem is that nobody wants it. Like nobody will let it happen. Even just getting the Fed was really hard. And there's still all these people who are like, and the Fed, you're diluting our money with inflation. Anyway, but yeah, so like the fiscal authority would be even more controversial because of its ability to generate deficits without representation, right? Like America will borrow and spend without, on unelected bureaucrats will be borrowing and spending on behalf of the people of America. So that's going to be a political tough sell, but it is what they should do.
Yeah, got it. Let's go to Daniel DeBurka. Daniel asks, as a non-American who pays a value-added tax on almost everything, can you explain why a national sales tax would be controversial and not something Democrats wouldn't want to bring in, perhaps coupled with decreasing income tax or another tax? Isn't taxing consumption fundamentally fairer and a better way to avoid avoidance? Those who consume more pay more?
Well, it's fine. Yeah. I mean, like VATs are great, but it's not because of fairness necessarily. Ideally, we'd want a progressive consumption tax, right? You want to tax rich people more than you tax poor people because but in this case, you'd want to tax people who are just like splurging on consumption. Remember that the unrealized gains tax will cause splurging, but we would like to make splurging reduced so that I guess, I don't know what people want. I don't know what people want on taxes, right? Like at this point, I'm starting to rant like a talk radio host or a Twitch streamer, which is the same thing. I do not know what people want from their taxes. I do not know what people think is fair. I do not know what people think is big versus small. I do not know who each group of people think should pay the taxes. Obviously never them. It's always someone else, but I don't know who thinks who should pay what taxes. I don't know like how progressive people want various taxes to be. I don't know which kinds of taxes people like more. I don't know. And I can see polls, and then the polls, then you try the thing, you follow the polls and you say, okay, we're creating, everybody likes the expanded child tax credit. Everybody loves it. So we'll make it. And then, 6 months after you make it, the polls are all really negative and like, shut it down. We just did what you want. Like, do polls actually tell you what people will be happy with? No, not necessarily. And so I think you sort of have to do what makes good economic sense and then try to sell it to people, I suppose. Yeah.
Makes sense. This question is from Zach Grolinski. Zach says, I work in oil and gas, and as I watch the energy transition, I wonder if my industry will shrink massively or get repurposed for geothermal. With the billions that have been invested in R&D, we've gotten really good at drilling, and we have a talented, well-paid domestic workforce. Do you think the oil industry will shift into drilling large numbers of utility-scale geothermal power plants? In my opinion, I think the technology is more than 90% of the way there, but I wonder if there's political will to prioritize de-risking the project so they get financed and proliferate. I'm concerned oil and gas workers could become a political cudgel like coal workers have become, but that fate is avoidable.
Yes, I agree with everything he just said. I don't even know what to add, honestly. Like that was a good rant. Yes, geothermal is great. We should do more of it. It requires land use permitting. So good luck with the regs there, but permitting reform, we need to do that. Geothermal is great. Love it. I guess geothermal's out in the boonies where the permitting isn't as big a problem. But you also still have to get it to the people. So you have to permit the transmission lines, right? From like Hot Rock City to like, human metropolis. Yeah, you have to put in transmission lines and be like, well, I don't want a power line in my backyard. I can see this power line from my yard and it's not in my yard, but it's really unsightly. And I think it will lower my property values. I don't want that power line here. Can't we just have degrowth? Can't we just get rid of capitalism? And so like, Mrs., Linda Nimbystein is out there nimbying away. But anyway, yes, geothermal is great, and it would indeed provide a lot of work for people from the oil and gas industry. Although honestly, the oil and gas industry will not die; it will shrink a bit. But like oil is used for feedstocks. Like petroleum is used to make all the stuff. That's why our balls are full of microplastics, right? Because we use plastic to make everything. Plastic makes it possible, as they used to say. I can pick up 10 random objects on my desk and 6 will be made of oil, right? Oil makes all our stuff, and that's fine because it's carbon neutral except for the production process itself, which we will decarbonize. But yeah, that's fine. We can make plastic all day. Maybe it will strangle some dolphins, and then the San Francisco will ban straws or something. But then we'll invent cool ships that go around cleaning up all the plastic out of the oceans, and that's very cool. I'm very optimistic about this. I've seen lots of reports of great progress in cleaning up the plastic out of the ocean, so I'm pretty happy about that. I'm not as sure about what happens to plastic that goes into landfills, but that's a topic for another day. Oil will not die. It will shrink a bit, but the people from the part that shrinks could definitely go into geothermal. That would be very cool. I like it. So yes, Zach Grolinski, you are on the right track, and I support your proposal.
Excellent. I want to segue back to Europe. Andreas says, when you call Germany unserious, are you being too harsh? What would cause you to update your view?
Well, okay, so you had perfectly good nuclear plants that had already been bought and paid for, they're producing green electricity, and you blew them up. You have an angry, like you have the Russian Empire on your doorstep, and you're like, well, we're gonna end new military aid to Ukraine because of fiscal restraint. We just don't want to borrow money. It's like, what else would you ever borrow money for other than like survival? And there are these things in terms of like trusting Russia on the gas thing. I think that's over. But then you see reports that like, despite the German government getting upset, German companies are just, shipping German jobs, manufacturing jobs to China now. Like, yeah, really? Guys, you saw how that worked out for America in the 2000s. Do you really want to do that? Like, obviously this is not unseriousness. German companies are being very serious about their profits, right? The nuclear thing is unserious, but then this trusting China too much and shipping all your jobs to China. By the way, your technology is just going to get stolen and given to a Chinese company. Like once you go to China, your days are numbered. You've entered the China cycle in which China steals copies or just purchases or whatever, gets your technology, gives it to Chinese backed, state-backed companies, and then outcompetes you in your other markets around the globe. Happened to Siemens. It happens every damn time, and they always fall for it. And now the German car companies are going to fall for it too. It always happens. They're stupid. So yeah, they're unserious. And the people blowing up nuclear plants are unserious. And the people cutting off aid to Ukraine are unserious. And the people who thought they could trust Russia, to be their sole source of gas and that this would somehow make Russia more peaceful, that was unserious. So yes, unserious Germany. Please be serious. Please do not be silly. Like basically Germany is just, it's like Monty Python. It's like, well, that's silly. Be serious. It's like, thank you. Now I did see Germany making some headway against NIMBYism, making it easier to build stuff, adjusting regs. That's good. Green shoots of progress. All right. We've seen them get serious in this area. Okay. But you got to get serious in all the things. Okay. Germany's building green energy. That'll be good. You should have kept the nuclear plants, but in 20 years, it won't matter. In 10 years, it won't matter. Now it'll matter for the next few years a lot, but it won't matter after you get all the renewable capacity online. So fortunately, Germany is managing to speed that up, and that's good. But yeah, much more needs to be done to make Germany a serious country again. Also spend more on your military.
Yeah. You had a tweet the other week that I saved where you were responding to someone who was saying that, the wackiest part of the Anglosphere is America. And you said, America hasn't had anti-immigrant riots in over a century. You had them last week. You can't build any housing. You have no industry to speak of. You elected a prime minister who lasted less time than a head of lettuce. You wrecked your economy by making it totally dependent on finance, and then you wrecked it again by leaving the EU. You have a huge anti-Semitism problem, and you almost elected Jeremy Corbyn. Your GDP per hour has barely increased since 2006. Your NHS is falling apart. Need I go on? Of course, this was about Britain, but I just thought it was a broader take on sort of the unseriousness of some of our leaders in Europe.
I was a little mean. That was mean.
Sometimes it was a banger.
Thank you. I feel like I got ratioed though, like by angry Britons.
You did have a bunch of angry Britons in Europe.
I think I got ratioed by the Britons. I guess I'm happy that they rallied around the flag to ratio an American econ blogger. That shows some pep, some get up and go, stiff upper lip. I don't know, some British expression for like good. That's carky. Is that I don't even know. I'm just going to make up words and attribute them to Britain. I can do that because I'm American, and we have all the hamburgers. We got the hamburgers, son. We can do what we want. Anyway, no. So Britain has made has a lot of problems with it, and is in sort of a sclerotic situation, similar to Italy and Japan, though not as bad as Italy and Japan. But definitely they need to take a hard look at things like they did increase R&D spending. That was impressive. But I don't, except for the housing thing, which they need to just build a lot more housing. I don't actually know beyond that. I don't understand what ails Britain, so I have to do a deeper dive and figure this out. The race riots thing, that's not fair. Like, Britain is not used to large scale immigration like we are. It's much more recent. We've been having large scale immigration since forever. It's new for them. It was mean of me to say this because honestly, this is just growing pains of becoming a nation of immigrants, which they have decided to do. And after Brexit, they stopped taking immigrants from Europe and started taking immigrants from Pakistan. That's where the new British people shall come, from Pakistan. And so, yeah, and maybe some from India as well, who may fight the Pakistani Britons and have big gang wars. That's what's interesting about British immigration. Like, you see Indian versus Pakistani gangs in British towns fighting each other. That's like old world conflict comes to new world. And that just does not happen very much in America. I mean, it used to happen a little bit. It used to happen in the 19th century. But recently, you just don't see, like, I mean, Indians and Pakistanis in America will be friends. They'll be like, oh yeah, you're South Asian, I'm South Asian too. Cool, let's watch anime, And so but you don't see gangs of these people fighting. Among low-skilled immigrants, like groups, would you see, like, I don't know, Hondurans fighting like Salvadorans and Guatemalans in the streets? I mean, maybe in a school cafeteria, you'd have like the Honduran kids have a cafeteria fight with like the Salvadoran kids, and then many parents get called, but you just don't see like open warfare in the streets like you do in the UK. And I think it's just because of growing pains. It's just because they're new to large scale immigration. America's not. Back in our early days, we had Protestants, running through Irish Catholic neighborhoods, just raping, burning, smashing, looting. Like, Gangs of New York is heavily sanitized compared to what actually happened. Like, people got killed. People got and like women, children, they would burn down Catholic churches. And the Catholics would be like, no, we'll fight you. No, don't mess with Catholics. And then the Catholics would go counter pogrom. And it was like a pogrom, right? It was like, that happened, the Philadelphia riots, but there were a whole bunch of other ones, not to mention the race riots with Black people. Like, that's on another level. And then like the 1910s, and 20s, we had a lot of growing pains. I mean, Black people weren't recent immigrants at that time, but still we had a lot of crazy shit. And we've had race riots in America as recently. I don't think 2020 was race riots. It was white anarchist kids making some mayhem. But then I guess Baltimore 2015, there was kind of a sort of a little race riot. Like, nobody died, but like I think they burned a CVS. Oh no, CVS. Well, it's very bad for the people who worked at the CVS, who are all local Black people. So that was a bad idea to burn that CVS. But in the grand scheme of things, it will not be big. The last big race riot, I mean, there was a little one in Cincinnati, I guess. Like, I think a couple people did die in the Cincinnati one in 2001, I want to say. And then there was, because I was a kid. And then there was the LA riots, which were absolutely brutal, large scale violence across a city, and large parts of the city did burn. And the number of people who died in that one city riot vastly, vastly exceeded the number of people killed in the George Floyd protests over many months all across America, which is, I think, a total of 13 people killed. Most of those people randomly shot by cops, in unrelated incidents that just somehow got counted as the protest. LA riots killed like dozens and dozens of people. And those are only the ones we know of. There may have been hundreds more. So like LA riots, man, people don't understand how crazy that was, because we didn't have social media. But like, George H.W. Bush sent in the army. Like, he sent in not the National Guard, the army. And there was this case where the army's like, okay, we'll back you up, and then the police guy is going into a house where there's like these rioters or criminals or whatever he thinks they are holed up in there. And he says, cover me. Now, in police language, cover me means wait to see if someone tries to shoot me and then shoot them, right? In army language, cover me means over my head. And so the police shot thousands upon thousands of rounds into the civilian house. Fortunately, everyone was in the basement and no one was hurt. That was amazing. But the army could have just massacred a house, or like the bullets could have like ricocheted into like neighboring houses. Like, that was off the chain. That was out of pocket. That was nuts. And like, people don't understand how nuts the world was at that time. And like, Portland protests, man. Portland people just like, you get a bunch of like, weird haired vegans going like and throwing down some statue of like, like John, no one cares the fifth. Like, that's nothing compared to the LA riots. I don't understand. Like, people are so soft these days. They're like, oh my God, the country burned. Like, a couple blocks burned.
Well, this is when people say a civil war is possible. I'm like, who's going to fight? Like, we don't have it. People only fight on the internet.
I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I will watch the Civil War people coming, and I will like be like, would anybody like some fancy tea? I'm really into fancy tea right now. How would you like some tea? Or in psilocybin, maybe I'll give them some shrooms.
Yeah, we don't have the stomach for it anymore. Before,
I mean, we'd fight if there was a threat, right? We'd go fight. Like, we'd go fight if like there was another like 9/11, or if China like bombed all our bases and stuff. We'd go fight. We know it's existential. People aren't going to fight their neighbors. Like, there's right-wing people who live down the street. There always have been. There always will be. They don't come into like my community and start like, shooting up gay people in the Castro. That doesn't happen. Although I will say, one time I was walking in the Castro and I was like, and some guy in a pickup truck yelled the F word at me. And I was like, bruh, you found the one non-gay guy in Castro to yell that at. You drove all the way out from Central Valley in your pickup truck to yell the F word at a non-gay guy in Castro Street. Congratulations. You are not fighting any civil war. You are too dumb. And so, so no one's going to fight the Civil War. Like, the only way there's a civil war is if the United States military like breaks into two factions and fights itself. And I don't see that happening.
But yeah, these people screaming on the internet are not going to war.
No, they don't even exist. They're AI now. Like, it used to be like some bored kids from Malaysia, and now it's AI. There are no kids. There is only math.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take into last question before we go. Phil Levin says, Noah, you were once anointed the chief neoliberal shill. You wrote a great post about neoliberalism. Can you summarize the legacy of neoliberalism, both the reasons for its existence and its overall impact?
Neoliberalism. Well, so neoliberalism was more of a way of thinking about economic policy than an actual collection of economic policies. And what neoliberalism really meant was that people started evaluating policies not in terms of like, does this support the businesses I like, or does this support the country, or does, like whatever they were thinking in the 70s. They were instead thinking, does this shrink government? Does this get the government off our backs? Does this get the government out of our lives? And that became the yardstick for good. And if you wanted you had to plead for special exceptions to that if you wanted to do anything. Like, if you wanted to, have government intervene to protect the environment, you'd have to come up with an argument about why there's an externality. And we said, government shall never intervene except when there's externalities and, a small, well-defined set of cases. Whereas before that, it was like, hey, here's the thing. We could have the government do it. That was what came out of the New Deal. And so then the neoliberal idea was like, if you're going to have the government do it, you better have a damn good excuse. And that was the idea. And so that constrained us in a lot of important ways. So when China sort of created an unbalanced world in the 2000s with currency subsidy and with, some other things, we should have pushed back against that. And the idea of tariffs to force China to upvalue its currency, that's what we should have done. We did not. We could have done that had we branded them as a currency manipulator. It was in the rules. We could have done it. We chose not to. And I think one reason is because people were afraid of anything that wasn't free trade. Where in this case, it would actually make trade freer if we could force China to appreciate its currency, because that would remove one distortion in the market, right, from the currency. So in this case, but just the idea of doing anything that felt like government controlling prices, intervening in the market, tariffs, protectionism, anything like that was automatically suspicious. And that was neoliberalism. And so it just stopped us from doing a lot of stuff, stopped us from doing industrial policy for various things. And it, yes, stopped us from like trying to imagine new forms of the welfare state. It constrained our imaginations in a lot of ways, and it gate kept. That was what it was more about, rather than like a laundry list of government policies or government to cut. It was, I mean, obviously tax cuts are part of it, deregulation is part of it, like free trade is part of it, but it was more of just a way of thinking of the world. And I think that way of thinking is now, it's not gone, but it's certainly diminishing. And we're coming up with something else, because neoliberalism was something created to fight the problems of the 1970s, right? You had inflation, you had sclerotic economy from high regulation, uncompetitive industries. You had, very high tax rates on a few people, which they didn't like. I don't know if that's a problem, but you definitely had lots of problems. And of course, we created all new problems like NIMBYism, right? And overregulation of land use. We created that in the 70s. But then we wanted to, a lot of people, including Jimmy Carter, by the way, wanted to shrink the government in order to just boost freedom and boost the economy. And so that's what we did. We did that with neoliberalism, I guess. But now to simply say anything neoliberal is bad, we're just going to do the opposite of that. That is letting the ideas of the 70s rule us in a contrary manner. We shouldn't just do the opposite of neoliberalism. We have to come up with something new that works on its own. We can't just I don't like neoliberalism. And then you just what would Milton Friedman do? And then do the opposite. That's a dumb way to make policy. We need better original frameworks. We need to think about, and so I think the best framework for us to think about is a framework of concrete goals. I think, neoliberalism left stuff to the market famously, and there were some things you got a lot of and some things you didn't get a lot of. And the things we didn't get a lot of include housing. They include cheap medical care. I mean, we didn't leave medical care to the market, but we have a more markety system than other countries. We don't have cheap medical care. We don't have cheap housing. Maybe some other things too, maybe education, maybe some other, childcare. Leaving it to the market didn't make it cheap. And so we've got to now bring government in and figure out ways to make these things cheap and abundant, and also, defend against China, military defense, and all the industries that support military defense against a large, technologically advanced peer adversary, right? So that's what we need to do now. I think we need a get results focus. And that's why I really like the YIMBYs, because they're very much into getting results on housing, instead of, they're like, well, it doesn't count as real housing if the government builds it, or it doesn't count as real housing if a private developer makes profit. No, it counts as housing no matter what. Get the housing. All the ways, do all the things. Build forests of housing rising from the plains and mountains and wherever, right? Build me giant, super tall forests of housing that make it look like this planet was built for giants. Build that, and I don't care how you do it. Just do it. And so I think that that's the paradigm that I hope will replace neoliberalism with its obsession with procedural correctness.
So certain pragmatism, and this is the abundance movement, supply side progressivism, etc.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. I'm with that.
Well, let's wrap on that note. We're at time. This has been a great mailbag episode. Listeners, do keep submitting your questions to our email that is in the comments. And Noah, as always, a pleasure. And until next time.
Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.